Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. We're here from AECOM today, and our presentation is called Delivering a Better World, and we're going to be giving you some information about our graduate and our placement opportunities. So I think people may kind of continue to join as we go through the slides, which is absolutely fine. And for those of you that are watching the recording after the event, welcome to you as well. Thank you for giving up your time to join us today. So I think I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Kate Farr, and I'm an early careers recruitment partner here at AECOM. I joined AECOM in March. So although I keep telling everyone that I'm new to the business, I'm not really that new anymore. But as you'll see as we go through the presentation, AECOM is a very big, very complex business, and I'm still getting my head around some parts of the business, which is why I've got one of my colleagues with me today. So between the two of us, I'm hoping that we can give you lots of really useful information and answer all of the questions that you have. Meg, did you want to briefly introduce yourself at this stage as well?
Yeah, can do. So hi everyone, again, just to repeat, thank you for joining us today. My name's Meg Ford, and I'm an environmental consultant with AECOM. I recently just came out of the graduate section of it about 6 weeks ago. And I've been with the company for a couple of years now. So I joined in September 21. So I graduated in the August and started in the September. And yeah, I'm from the environment team. So as Kate mentioned, there's a lot of different teams and departments within AECOM, and that's the team that I sit within.
Thank you. Thanks, Meg. So we've got the next hour or so to cover some of the points that we kind of feel are important to kind of pass on to you all. So we're going to talk a little bit more about AECOM as a business, what we do, the services we provide and the projects that we get involved in, a little bit more about our work environment and our culture, to obviously help you to decide whether AECOM is the right type of environment for you. A little bit more about our graduate development programme with some tips on how you can ace that application process. And we'll touch on our placement opportunities. As I kind of mentioned to Meg before we started, I can talk for quite a long time. So I'm hoping not to do that today, to allow you lots of time at the end to ask all of the questions that you might have. So you can see that you've got a questions box on your screen. Please do drop your questions into that questions box, and we'll leave plenty of time to answer those questions at the end of our presentation. So I think at this stage, if I could ask Amy to show our video. Thank you for that, Amy. So for those of you that aren't familiar with AECOM, hopefully that video might have given you a kind of a flavour of what we're about. So we're an infrastructure consulting firm. So we don't make or manufacture anything ourselves here at AECOM. Effectively, what we do is we're delivering a whole range of professional services throughout the life cycle of a project, and we're working with clients on their projects to support them with things like giving advisory services, planning, might be design and engineering services, construction management, across a whole variety of different sectors and projects. I think the thing that I really love about working within, this sector is that the projects that we work on have the potential to have a real positive impact on people's lives. And that's something that is really, really, really powerful. And I find really exciting. I'm not an engineer. I don't have a technical background myself, but to kind of work within a business that is, working on some really exciting and interesting projects is just a really, really nice place to be. If I skip through to the next slide, this gives you an idea of the size of our business, I guess. So I think actually it says we are a business of 47,000 people, but I actually think it's closer. It's closer to 50. We work across 7 continents. And as you can see from that number on there, we invest really heavily into our early careers staff. So we have around 1,400 graduates and apprentices on our development programme at the moment. We recruit around sort of anywhere between 300, 400, 500 graduates, placement students and apprentices each year into all of our businesses within the UK and Ireland. And you can see some of the stats there that show some of the awards that we've won that we're really, really proud of as well. So obviously we have a big global reach. I think AECOM actually started as an American business, and we've really grown through a series of acquisitions. And we're now based in, many areas of the world, not based absolutely everywhere, but in many places, which gives us a really good global reach in terms of the sectors that we work in and the regions that we work in as well. I think something to point out here is that if you were to join us and work in one of our offices in the UK, doesn't necessarily mean that you'd only be working on UK projects. Many of our staff in the UK work on projects that are based in other regions, and that's really exciting thing to be part of, working with other AECOM staff in other regions and working with clients in other regions. So in terms of where we are in the UK and Ireland, then you can see from this map we've got a really good spread across the UK and Ireland. Some of those offices obviously are bigger than others and might kind of house multiple teams, whereas other offices may be slightly smaller and may just have 1 or 2 different teams based there. But hopefully, depending on kind of where you want to base yourself in the UK and Ireland, then we should have an office that's close by to you. So a little bit more then about our services and our projects. So we service 5 main markets. So buildings and places, environment and energy, programme management, transportation and water. So those are the main markets that we serve, and our clients sit within those markets. So if we go into some of these in a little bit more detail then. So buildings and places is an area that I'm a little bit more familiar with because it's the area that I recruit graduates, placement students and apprentices into. So I think the strapline that buildings and places have is that they're creating places that matter and communities that thrive, and which I think really nicely sums up the things that they do. So effectively what we're doing here is supporting clients to design buildings and spaces that meet their unique needs, integrating also their brand and their culture as well. If I can give you, just one example of a project that we're working on, something that we're working on at the moment is we're delivering master planning services for the LA 28 Olympics. So it really does embody, kind of buildings and the spaces that we live and work and kind of, move around within. Our water business is it's always a very popular part of the business, I think, for graduates to apply to. So within this part of the business, we're providing sustainable water solutions, and that might be through looking at wastewater, floods and coastal defences, but also kind of managing and maintaining our water infrastructure as well. So that's quite a varied part of our business. Transportation is a big area of our business. We're looking at kind of transforming mobility really and ensuring that communities are well connected. So we're doing everything from supporting clients in modernising bridges, their highways, ports, for example, looking at electrifying their fleets, working on kind of big projects like high speed rail, and looking at how we can integrate new technologies into transport sector as well. Program management. So this is really about kind of bringing the best people together to work on the world's most complex projects. So as you can imagine, let's take high speed high speed rail link as an example. A project of that size can span decades. Really kind of long project, but also involves hugely multidisciplinary teams. So we're able to kind of support our clients with managing, kind of a small part of that program, big part of their program, in bringing together all of those different people that are involved in a project of that size. Environment, this is definitely Meg's area of expertise. So Meg, I'm going to hand over to you at this point, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about what you do in your role as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So the previous market that Kate mentioned is that environment, essentially, we will work with those other markets as well. So if you're building a road, a railway, any kind of water infrastructure, so dam or drainage systems, for example, is an element of environmental assessment will need to get taken place to make sure that the project isn't negatively impacting the area that it's being placed in. So the kind of topic on the screen where you can see EIA sat within remediation and waste management is where I sit, which is environmental impact assessment. So we work with all the other teams that are listed on the screen in producing assessments for projects to make sure that they're compliant with current regulations and legislation set out by the government, and also with whatever client we're working with, whether it's public or private sector, that we're compliant with any local plans or development plans that they also have. Amongst that is, whilst making sure it's compliant with regulation and law, is also being like an advocate for the environment. So if when we go out and do surveys, for example, they find a particular species of plant that's very rare, or they find barn owls or otters or water voles, for example, is they need to, within the design for the project, they need to be putting in mitigations to make sure that those species aren't negatively affected or displaced from their habitats once the project is operational or even during construction. So on each assessment that we will do, as I said, we will engage with all the teams that are on this slide. The bigger ones tend to be ecology and water, because there tends to be more outward impacts that a scheme can contribute, whereas the others tend to be more closer to where the scheme is actually being delivered. So as Kate said, some of the projects span years, which I wasn't aware when I joined the company. I didn't know how long it took for a road to be built. I just assumed it got thrown up somewhere. But from some of the projects that I've been on, AECOM or what we were in the UK, as Kate mentioned, it got bought out by other companies. We have been doing work since like 2008 on some of these projects, and they're still not built yet. So there's still more environmental work and design work that needs doing before they can go out and start constructing. So it can span anywhere from 2 years that before they can go out and do construction, right up until like 15 years. It's completely dependent on the size of the project. So Kate, would you mind moving on? That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Did you want to say anything on energy, or do you want me to cover this one?
If you cover this one, because unfortunately I haven't had that much experience in the energy sector yet.
That's fine, don't worry. So this is the last slide, which covers the sectors that we work within. So we do have teams that work on energy projects as well. So that's everything from energy efficiency services, looking at renewable energy solutions, grid modernisation. includes things like looking at solar energy, implementing solar energy into projects, and offshore wind as well, amongst many other things. I think at this stage we'll be skipping across to a couple of projects that Meg's going to talk through to give you a bit of more of an insight into some of the projects that we work on.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So as we said, like with the water environment or the water team, is they will do all the design work, for example, in the engineering, and by and largely, if it's a water-based project, the project management team will also sit within the water sector rather than environment. So with sustainable urban drainage systems, these are things you may have passed walking on the street, not knowing what they were, or just thinking that it was a nice, vegetated space that trees and plants have been put in. But essentially the design for them is to help urban areas reduce their risk of flooding. So one of the earlier schemes was in Sheffield after the floods in 2007, which was quite catastrophic, to put it mildly. And from that, Severn Trent and Sheffield Council decided we need to put some sustainable urban drainage systems into the city area to help with the overflow of rainwater. So we went out on a site visit not that long ago to see what they look like in practice. And as I said, if you were an average person, you would walk past them and probably take no notice of them whatsoever. But essentially, for these two examples of sustainable urban drainage systems, it can be quite small, quite large ditch essentially that's dug into the side of the road, but it's got infiltration designed to make sure that the water drains from the surface down into the groundwater below in the soil, rather than going into sewage overflow and then end up being discharged into rivers, which is by and large where you get a lot of the river flooding from. It's not just the rainfall that falls in the river, it's the water that's getting discharged from the sewerage systems that we have. So these two are slightly different. So rain gardens tend to be slightly smaller, which are the two pictures on the left-hand side. They tend to be slightly smaller than the bioswales. They essentially have the same function in that they'll be vegetated, which helps pull the water down and keep it as a resource for the plants, which obviously minimises the amount of watering that the council will have to do as well. So it's keeping it in the best quality it can be without having to have somebody go and water them, every couple of days, most likely. And on the right-hand side is what we call a detention basin. So the top one is what it looks like in construction, and then the bottom one is what it looks like when it's full. So essentially these will routinely fill with water and then drain through. So they don't they look like ponds, very large ponds, but they will not have water in them all year round. The idea is that they hold excess rainwater again that gradually soaks away. So if you walk past one, you may see it where it's full and you may see it where it's essentially completely empty. So the idea of this is that there's more water in the groundwater level that can go to other trees and things that are in the area, but also that can be tapped in for future drinking supply and water usage within homes, rather than ending up in rivers and they overflow and flood all of the local town. Similarly, which is what happened in Chesterfield not too long ago and further north. So at the minute we are looking, these ones are going to be put in Mansfield, which is just north of Nottingham, if you're aware of the area. And they've had some fairly drastic floods over the years. So the idea is with Severn Trent is that we supply these to minimise the amount of flooding that they have. If you want to go on to the next slide, Kate. So to kind of show how different projects can be, the sustainable urban drainage systems are a very small project in comparison. We're delivering lots of them over a sizable area, but they take a lot less time to get into practice. So those are being constructed now, and I was only doing the environment work on it back in February, so it's a shorter project life cycle. when you look at something as big as the A14 Cambridge to Huntington, which is a road project that was run by National Highways, this is one of the ones where the original surveys for it, which AECOM did, were done back in 2008. And this scheme was only opened up to the public in May 2020. So that's 12 years between starting the background work to do the scheme and then when it was actually operational for the public to use. So when you have road projects, you have 7 stages that they have to go through. So we will be involved from stage 1 through to 3. Construction is then stage 4 and 5. And then consultancies like us will go back out at stage 7 to check essentially that the mitigation that we prescribed before they built the scheme is actually on site and is operating as it should be. So this scheme we went out on in summer of this year, and the things that we will be looking at is the drainage features that they've put in place. So the ponds that you can see on screen are different examples that we saw on site. And when we go out when we do this type of work and go and see a road that's already built, is we are essentially ranking or scoring the functionality of the mitigation that they've put on site. So the pond in the top corner is pretty good, to be fair. It's got an open amount of water that can still take more capacity if needed. It's not constrained by any reeds, and it doesn't appear to have a lot of pollutant evidence around the perimeter of the pond or within the centre. The pond to the right of that has got more algae growth in it and has got more reeds present, which will limit the amount that the water is able to drain away into the outlets and inlets that are at either side of the pond. And then the bottom one, there is no visible water at all. It's fully constrained with reeds. So when we're reporting this back to the client, is they will have to undertake maintenance to ensure that these mitigation practices are functioning as they should be. So we're highlighting to them where there are issues on site and things are not performing as intended. So other than kind of water things, we'll be looking at mitigation that they might have put in for like badgers, any bird or bat boxes, if those were picked up on the surveys before the scheme was built. So for this particular scheme, we saw an artificial badger set, which can range in design, but essentially they will have to close sets that are near the site potentially, depending on how close they are. So I think it's if they're in within about 50 metres of where they're planning to put the road, they have to, after the badgers are vacated, so they set up monitoring to make sure the badgers are no longer there, they will seal the set off and then they will relocate one within the same area, but probably about, it's far enough back from the road. So you're probably talking about half a mile-ish back from the road to make sure they're far enough away from traffic that they're not going to get hit and that there's no impact to their foraging routes and things like that. Equally is they will have to put in mammal tunnels underneath the road so that any animals can cross from one side to the other without having to go up onto the carriageway. So roadkill is quite a prominent thing that you see on roads, but if it's been anything that's been built recently, is you shouldn't see that type of thing because they have to put up fencing along the perimeters of the road so the mammals can't get through, and then they have to go underneath through the tunnels instead. So these type of projects, the road ones, generally take longer than things like this drainage systems, purely because there's more avenues and more consultations that they have to go through before they can be approved. So yeah, that's a highlight of kind of the difference you can have with one project compared to another.
Thanks, Meg. And I think what's really fascinating is that is a road project but actually the impact on the environment is also a huge consideration in itself. And lots of considerations for the client and areas that we support with on that. So that's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to move on to talk about a little bit more about our work environment and our culture. I think, as I kind of pointed out, because we don't make or manufacture products ourselves, we're not selling a product to our clients. Effectively, we are selling the skills and the expertise of our people. Therefore, it's really important that we invest in our staff and that we support them, because they are our asset effectively. So really key to our culture at AECOM, and it is, we're sort of living by our values that you saw on the video earlier on, about kind of working safely, working collaboratively, supporting our staff to be innovative. So we need to make sure that we're supporting our staff in order to kind of get the best out of our people. So you can see some of our initiatives on the screen there. One that I'll just pick out on is Focus Fridays. This was something that was completely new to me when I joined AECOM. It's something I hadn't heard of before. So we have an initiative here where we're encouraged not to schedule internal meetings on Friday afternoons. And what that allows us to do is focus on key tasks, kind of making sure that things are tied up for the weekend. For me personally, it works really well because I don't work on Mondays. So it allows me to make sure that I can, finish off all my tasks and switch off for the Monday. Another key point on there, freedom to grow, I'm just going to talk through in a little more detail, because I think this is something that is quite unique to AECOM. This is a philosophy that we kind of live by here at AECOM. It's essentially supporting our staff to be their best selves. So it's about enabling our staff to work in a way that is best for them, because we feel that, kind of when you're free to be yourself, that's when you really thrive. So this is about not just about kind of challenging that notion of working 9 to 5 and being in the office 5 days a week, although that is a part of it. It is really recognising that everybody works in a different way and has strengths in different areas. And it's making sure that we are inclusive and that we allow people to work in that best way. So I think even before COVID happened and the lockdowns, our staff were working quite flexibly. Before that kind of took place, we had the technology that enabled our staff to do that. I think if I flick through to the next slide, you can see, an example of a graduate that we have that's based in Chesterfield, and how he uses his freedom to grow. I think if I lived on the edge of the Peak District, I'd be going for bike rides and walks during the day as well. But it really does make a difference to kind of how you feel when you're working here. And also, as I mentioned, we might be working with clients or with AECOM staff in other parts of the world. So that might mean taking calls really early in the morning or a bit later into the evening. So having that flexibility to adjust your hours a little bit is really, really nice to have. So if I move on now to our development programme. So if you were to join AECOM, obviously you join a part of the business, and you would be supported on a day-to-day basis to develop your technical skills, your specialist technical skills, depending on the team that you're obviously working for. But alongside that, our 2-year graduate programme is allowing you the time and the space really to focus on developing your professional technical skills as well. Sorry, your professional soft skills. So across the course of the 2-year programme, you can see that you kind of cover three phases. And Meg has recently gone through this herself. Is there anything that you want to add on this, Meg?
Yeah, I think when it's so as a 2-year development, is that the 2 years isn't set in stone. So for example, I'm technically no longer a graduate, but I am doing my advanced 3 this December. So it's not as cut as you have to complete it whilst you're a graduate in order to get promoted or to go further in the business. You can still be doing this outside of the 2 years, and it doesn't hamper your progression in any way. I think the advanced one normally gets delivered within about the first 6 months of you joining. So it depends when you join AECOM. So I joined in the September, and they tend to, anyone who joins from September to about November we are classed as one cohort for the advanced. So we will get the advanced one at one time, and then if anybody who starts in like February or March time will be on a separate cycle. So it tends to be delivered kind of every 6 months, you get a rotation almost. But so advanced one got delivered to me when I think it was January of 2022. And advanced 2 I completed between 2022 and 2023. So it kind of spanned from November to January. As I said, advanced 3 I will be doing this December. So it's kind of, I'd look at it more as like an 18, it's between 2 years to 3. It's not set in stone that it's a 2. But it's very useful for kind of getting a broader picture of AECOM, especially advanced 1, because you're new to, most people probably haven't done any work experience, or they may not have done. So it's giving you a better understanding of how the business functions as a business, not just your one role in your team. Whereas advanced 3 is slightly more, it's still soft skills, but it's slightly more about some of the projects themselves rather than the business. So as it says, it'll take you through a project life cycle of how we win the work, then presenting skills as well. So it kind of rounds it all off essentially.
Yeah, and also a good opportunity to meet other graduates outside of your own business area, your own team, and your office location as well. So it's giving you the chance to build those networks, which hopefully you'll then continue to develop as you move through your career. I guess an important part of our graduate program really is supporting our staff to continued professional development. So we do support our graduates through to chartership with maybe with one of the institutions that you see on the screen there, but it's not limited to that. So that's a key part of our program that we feel is important. So a little bit then on the application process. So our roles tend to open in September. So we opened our roles in September for roles that essentially may start next year. Some of our roles may have more of an immediate start. Best to check the job descriptions. But I think in general we have quite a straightforward application process, and we have less stages than perhaps some other companies that you're looking at and applying to. So a key part really is that first stage, and it's that online application. So it shouldn't take long to complete. It's a case of uploading your CV, and then you have the opportunity to answer a few questions around things like your relevant modules. And you can add a couple of paragraphs on why you've decided to apply for that business area. It's not kind of providing essay questions by any stretch. But I do think this is it's really important to stress that you should try and tailor that application as much as you possibly can. So definitely add a little bit around why you've applied for the role, because all applications are screened by me and my team, by the team of recruiters. And then the hiring managers will then review applications, and they just really want to see that you've got an understanding of what you're applying to. You can apply to more than one role. I wouldn't suggest that you kind of apply for everything that you see, because you're not really going to be able to give the application process, kind of the time really that you need to be able to make sure that you're making the best application that you can. But as you'll see, if you do choose to apply, if you're a civil engineer, for example, you will have multiple teams that you could apply to. So it's really about doing your research and thinking about what is the best fit for you, what's the best fit for you location wise as well, and making sure that you demonstrate that in the application. The next stage then is the online assessment. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, that's not actually in place at the moment. So all the more reason to get your application in sooner rather than later. This is actually being developed at the moment, but what we will have in place is an online assessment, which will be scenario based. So it'll be like a situational judgment test, if you're familiar with that, where you'll be presented with a series of scenarios and given some options which best align to how you would act in that situation. And it will be completely bespoke to AECOM as well. So it will be presenting you with situations that you would come across as a graduate at AECOM. Then the final stage, it does vary between our teams, but it would be a final stage interview or assessment. I'd say typically it is a final stage interview, and the hiring managers that are interviewing may include a small assessment as part of that interview. In some cases, there would be a short assessment day. But as I say, it does vary from team to team. And then hopefully we'd be able to follow up then with an offer. As I'm sure you're probably finding out with your applications, there are some of our roles which are incredibly popular. We receive, a huge number of applications, way more than actually, opportunities that we have. So if we can't then make you an offer, what we are keen to do is try and show you what other options there might be available within the business that might suit your skill set a little bit better. So we do try and move people around as much as we possibly can. In terms of minimum criteria, you'll find everything that you need in the job description. Some of our roles may require you to have a master's level degree, others don't. We don't expect you to have relevant work experience, and we completely understand that COVID and the effect of lockdowns means that experience has been much harder to come by over the last few years. But it really is about just making the best of any experience that you have and putting that onto your application. And if there is specific requirements around degrees that are needed for certain roles, as some of our roles are very technical, and you will need to have a specific degree for that particular role, but that should be on the job description. So just make sure that you check those. A few more tips. First port of call really is to consult the job description and decide actually where you want to apply, and to do your research. So that could be, by looking at our website, maybe checking our social media channels. I always think actually, following a company on social media is a really good way of finding out a little bit more about the culture of that company. It's more up to date than the website is usually, and it can give you a real insight into working for that company. Using that application form, as I said, to really demonstrate your interest and any experience that you have that's relevant to that particular role. Preparing for the SJT as and when that is in place, and then preparing for your interview. And we always try and give you as much information as we can before any interview. Letting you know who will be interviewing you, where it's going to take place, how you can prepare, if there's anything you need to take along with you. We make sure that you're fully prepared for that, so that you can kind of do the best job that you can.
Just if I may,
Yeah.
Kate,
Sure.
just on the last point with the interview stage, one thing that I would say is a really good tip is make sure you look at the public AECOM website and have a look at generally the services and things like that, and also the type of projects that we're on, because it definitely shows off to a hiring manager if you're able to pose them some questions, and it's not just one way. So if you've got any questions that are kind of project specific, it shows that you've taken the step to actually look at what the company is doing. It's not just you've seen it and you wanted to apply for a position because it sounds like something you're interested in.
Yeah, perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Meg. And then just finally, just to finish off very quickly on our placement opportunities. So we do offer industrial and summer placement opportunities. We don't always advertise all of our placement opportunities. We kind of work in a bit more of an agile way than that. The way that you can apply for a placement is to send us your CV into the email address that you can see on the screen there. Let us know what you're looking for. Let us know if you're interested in a particular business area, or if it's location that's kind of really key for you for your placement. And then we send your applications on to the business, and then they'll obviously let us know if they have the capacity to take you on. So I think this is where we kind of finish with the presentation, and we'll move now on to the questions. I've seen that there's quite a few questions that have been coming in as we've been talking, so we'll try and go through some of those now. Okay, let me try and start with. Okay, so when will industrial and summer placements opportunities open? You can apply for those at any time. I'd suggest that you send your CV in as soon as you can, just to make sure that you get your first choice of business area and location. But typically we will consider, your requests sort of all year round, but best to try and get your applications in, your CV into us as quickly as you can, just to give yourself the best chance of getting the role and the location that you want as well. Any job opportunities for postgraduate students in business administration? So we don't have specific roles for, we don't have a specific kind of MBA recruitment program as such, but that doesn't mean to say that your skills, aren't important. It just means that you need to really look at what might suit your experience. So what did you do sort of before you did your MBA? How does that align to the different parts of our business? So it will be a case of, I think, just really reviewing our job opportunities and seeing what best suits your skills. What do I need to do to stand out in my application for both placements and graduates? Meg, did you have any kind of pointers, anything that you did that you think helped?
I think whatever position you're applying for is, if you can capture in your initial application, like your reasoning for wanting to do this role and like the passion behind it, any particular modules that you really enjoyed in your university course that kind of show those skills, anything that can show, it's not just a job for me, it's I want to be doing this in this business. I think that's probably the best thing you can do, because I think you get to a point, I only did this 2 years ago, is you get to a point where you're applying for jobs and you're kind of just applying and not really taking the time to tell an employer why they should hire you over somebody else. So putting that argument forward is a really key part of it, I think.
That's, I completely agree with that, Meg. I think, let's say, for example, you're a mechanical engineer and you have multiple roles that you could apply to. If you can apply, if you apply for a role and you can use that application to apply for all of the different teams, then it's probably not tailored enough to that specific role. So the job description is your friend when you come to apply. What does it say in that job description about actually what you would be doing in the role itself? What type of projects would you be working on, would you be doing? And hopefully through that process also you might rule out some options as well. Really focus on those roles that you really, really, really want and that you're really interested in, and put your effort into those applications, I would say. Sorry, so many questions coming in all the time that I'm losing my place in the questions tab. Okay, for placement years, should a cover letter be sent in with the CV? That's a really good question, actually. I would suggest that you do send in a cover letter. Now, a challenge that you're going to have when you're applying for a placement is that you're not applying for a role that is advertised on the website as such. So something that you can do is take a look at the graduate roles that we're advertising at the moment. Are there job descriptions attached to those roles to give you a better idea, as to the types of roles that we typically recruit into and the teams that we have, and that should help you with your cover letter. Also think about, why are you applying to AECOM as a consultancy as opposed to a different type of organisation? What is it about working for a consultancy that interests you? And think about, the skills that you have and the experience you have that you could bring to the role as well. So it's not a necessity that you have to include a cover letter, But I definitely think if you just take that little bit of extra time to send in a cover letter, then it does it definitely kind of pushes you up the queue a little bit. So we have somebody that's done bachelor's in psychology and done master's in project management. Which one is a good option to continue further? Do you have anybody with that type of skill set in environment, Meg, that you sort of...
I think that's actually quite interesting, because we had graduate last year. She did psychology bachelor's and then went and did an environmental master's, and she came on as a graduate within the environment team. So I think as long as you've got a degree of some kind that's in the field you want to go into, you should be able to still apply for it. It won't hold you back that you've done a master's in a separate field. So yeah, I think you should still apply for it. If you want to do project management, it's still apply for project management role.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, if anything, use your bachelor's. If you've done your bachelor's in something slightly different, use that as the thing that makes you unique. Because you still will have gained really useful skills from that degree, that will then give you a different sort of perspective as a project manager. I think in terms of the roles that we tend to recruit for, we definitely have project management skills. You won't find any roles that are specifically related to psychology as such, but there may be other roles that you can align those skills to. Some roles that we advertise for, you don't have to have a specific degree. It's more about having an interest in that area. So somebody said that they've applied for a graduate role and they think the online test is already in place. I'm not aware that it is. I don't think it's been fully developed as yet, unless you're applying for a different region. So potentially if you're applying for a role outside of the UK, then there should be a test in place. But perhaps if you could drop an email to the grad email address that you saw, and we can look into that. But I don't think there is an online test in place, or there shouldn't be, unless it's been developed really quickly without me knowing. Someone's asking if they can apply for more than once for the same role. Submitted an application, but think they could have done a better application. Potentially you can reapply for a role, even if you've kind of had if you've been told that you've been unsuccessful. What I would say is, if you're going to be reapplying with the same application, then potentially that you're not going to sort of be successful. You need to really kind of re-look at what else you can do within that application, and go refer back to the job description as well, because it might be that perhaps you don't quite have the right degree, for example. Just make sure that you do meet the criteria for the role. Sorry, I'm just working through these questions. There are so many. So we have a few questions around whether international students can apply. So for placement roles, anyone can apply for our placement roles. Just need to make sure that you're checking the requirements of your visa to make sure that you're sort of in line with all of the legal things, around sort of how many hours you can work and when, and that kind of thing. For our graduate programs, I think at the moment we're not able to offer sponsorship. It is worth checking the job descriptions, and the position on that may change in the near future. So certainly kind of keep checking in with us on that. So somebody's asking, does AECOM have any window of entry for experienced hires? So I guess perhaps you might be referring to, if you've got experience already. Generally, what we would say is, if you have more than 2 years relevant work experience, then a graduate role might not be the best route for you, because you would be joining that graduate program. And as we've kind of talked about, that graduate program is allowing you to develop your professional soft skills, which you may not feel that you need if you have more than 2 years experience. So if you have more than 2 years experience, we would normally direct you to the experienced hire opportunities. Those will probably be more suitable for you. But that's, I guess that, yeah, that's the advice I'd give you on that. So we have somebody who's done an MSc Water Resources Engineering, experience in flood management, water management, and hydrological modelling, applied, but not being successful. So, firstly, Meg, what part of the business should this individual be applying to? What are they most relevant for, would you say?
They were probably within like the water market, and I would probably say they've got hydrology graduate placements and they've got water scientist. So it'd probably be one of those to apply to. But I think I've scrolled through some of the questions, and there's a few that have said they've gotten the unfortunate emails. If you're getting rejection emails purely based off of your CV when you're applying with that or your cover letter, then I suggest if you've got a careers advisor at your uni is to go through your CV with them, because it's probably it's either formatted not very reader friendly, or there's key things that are kind of further down the page that may need reorganizing to the top, and things like that an employer is missing, and is not getting those key points where they should be on your CV. Because I think it is when you are applying for jobs, you will get rejections from them. It's your first one you applied for isn't necessarily going to be the one that you get. And when I was doing it, I was retweaking my CV quite a lot based on I was not getting certain roles that I was applying for. So if it's a case of you're getting it right at the early point of applying, is I'd go and see your careers advisor and get them to read over your CV and cover letter with you, because there's something there that is either not jumping out strong enough for you to be considered further along.
Yeah, that's really, really useful advice there. I think it's definitely use your careers department. And usually if you've graduated, you can still access that support for an amount of time as well. For some universities, it's kind of lifetime support. But sometimes getting somebody else to check over your application, they might spot something, that you haven't kind of considered yourself before. There's a question here about whether there's any salary progression over the course of the graduate programme, as the starting point isn't really appealing. I should point out that on the slides you would have seen the salaries for our placement opportunities. That was on the very, very last slide. I don't think we had the graduate salaries in this presentation, but you can see that information on our online brochure. It is available to look at. Meg, do you want to take this, or I'm happy to?
Yeah, I mean, graduate salaries have increased quite significantly from when I joined. I think it's about the ballpark for a graduate on a bachelor's degree is about 28,000, I think now, or 27.5. It's between those two. If you've got a master's or a PhD, it can grow from that because you've got more experience. They don't tend to give a figure based on if you have a master's or if you have a PhD. It'll be by the company's discretion, but the starting point tends to be that 27.5, 28. Whilst you're on the graduate programme, so the 2 year, until you get promoted to consultant level essentially, or whatever the equivalent is in your market of the position above, is you will have 6 monthly reviews. So if you join in September like I did, I had one review in the March after I joined, and then the September again, where we come around to our annual cycle, and then I had another one in the February. So you get, if for example you're a graduate for 2 years and then you get a promotion, you should have 3 salary reviews between you starting and your promotion. So yes, there is quite a significant pay increase or pay review that you could get in that time. But yeah, as Kate said, the graduate salaries weren't shown here, and they are much larger than they were when I joined. So to get the proper number is I'd look at the brochure or our online salary that's quoted, but it is about the 27.5, 28 grand mark for somebody with a bachelor's.
Yeah. Marta, I can see that you've put 22 further down in the questions tab. That's not our graduate starting salary. That's for placement roles. And actually we pay a little more for placement roles in London. So the starting salary for if you have a bachelor's degree is 28.5. And for a master's degree it's 30.5. And then there are slight adjustments for some office locations, and for some very specialist areas as well. And if you have relevant work experience, then potentially there are adjustments for that as well. Somebody's asked when the closing date for graduate roles is. That's a really good question, actually. I didn't cover that in the presentation. So there is no set closing date. We review applications as and when we get them through. It's on a rolling basis, and then we tend to close the role as soon as we have enough applications. So the answer always to that, it's never straightforward, but just to apply as soon as you can to give yourself the best chance of getting that your first choice of role and your first choice of location as well, because there are some locations, as you can imagine, which are really, really popular, and some teams which receive lots of applicants as well. So just apply as soon as you can, but make sure that you put some time into that application process as well. So somebody's asked if we have internships or insight days for first year architecture students, but I think just generally across the board, you can apply for an internship in your first year. We don't kind of restrict our summer placement opportunities to kind of penultimate year students or anything like that. So definitely we are flexible on that, and you should send your CV in if you're keen. And if anything, it just shows that you're really keen to start getting an insight into the business, and into the different types of roles that are available. And Jessica, I think you're really doing the right thing there in starting early, because you really need to build up over the next few years an idea as to where you want to end up, and use your placement experience to help you actually decide what you want to do in your graduate role. Somebody's asked about biomedical science, whether that's a relevant degree at all. I have to say I'm not 100% sure on that. Meg, have you seen anybody with that type of degree within environment at all?
I've not myself, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have them. I think if you look at, again, our brochure that's online, most of the teams or markets that you can apply for has the roles, and then the generally accepted degrees that they will consider for those roles. So for anyone in environment, you could have anything ranging from like geography right down to like a specialist one where it's kind of like water management, and you could still apply for the same role. So it's worth looking at our brochure and where it details out the accepted degrees for the position that you're looking at.
Yeah, definitely. And also to add to that, there are some roles where you don't have to have a specific degree. It's more about the transferable skills that you've got. So it does depend on how you want to use your degree as well, and whether we have opportunities that align with what you really want to do in your career. So I have a question about whether what would our suggestion be for a middle-aged person who wants to take a new shift in their profession, so a new start after a decade of built environment and academic experience. Meg, do you have any advice on that?
I think that would be very similar to kind of if you've got experience, is it would be looking at the other options that we've got open. If you've got 2 years plus, as Kate said, is it wouldn't be suitable for a graduate position. So if you're kind of in a shift in profession, it may be kind of you're looking at a consultant level or senior consultant, which are still kind of earlier on in careers rather than higher up. But it would be completely dependent on what the interviewer or whoever's reviewing your application, so that you may end up, they come back with questions to you as to what exactly you've done within your experience and any relevant project work. So if you've got that on your CV or your cover letter, I would pull out as many examples as you can that are relevant for the role you're wanting to apply for. But I would look at kind of the consultant and senior consultant levels rather than graduate for that case.
Yeah, I mean, we have had people in a similar situation apply for graduate roles, and we always send on to the hiring managers, and it's for them to kind of decide. And sometimes it's been a conversation with that individual about a graduate role probably isn't right for you necessarily, but this is what else we have that might suit. But similarly, if somebody's gone back to university and done a degree in something different, then age is definitely not a restriction on joining the graduate program. It's more about actually what's the best fit and whether you're going to get the benefit from joining a graduate program. We have kind of a minute left, so I'm just going to try and answer a couple more. Somebody's asking whether we have opportunities for civil engineers for December, January intake. I would say is we're generally quite flexible on start dates where we possibly can be. Some of our roles will be for an autumn 2024 start, because we will have just taken on some graduates into that team, whereas other teams are more flexible and might have a more immediate need. It may say on the job description and be quite clear in the job title actually when that role is due to start. But if you're not sure, you can drop a message through to our inbox, and then we will let you know. I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of these questions, Amy, from GTI. So I think we may need to leave it there. But I'm very happy if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask any follow-up questions. I'm more than happy to answer questions that we didn't get the chance to run through. And you can also email us as well, and we'd be very happy to answer your queries. But just really wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for joining the session today. Really hope that you found it useful and that you know a little bit more about AECOM now, and you can make that decision as to whether we're the right sort of business for you. Thank you all for joining, and thank you so much to Meg as well for filling in all the blanks and actually teaching me a few things that I didn't know as well. Thank you all.
I was just going to say, Kate, on the back of that, if anyone's got any more specific kind of project questions or want to know a bit more about what I do with my role and things like that, team specific, feel free to ask me on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Meg, and thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.